The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Effective Facility and Asset Lifecycle Management. I'm Ann Vasquez, the Editor-in-Chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by Oracle. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions via the question box in that panel. You can send these questions in at any time during the presentation, and they will be answered shortly after the presentation ends. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of your control panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the control panel. So please be sure the panel is expanded so you can access the question box. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please also send us a message in that question section. Now, I'd like to introduce your speaker for today, George Haddad. George is Senior Director of Business Development and Industry Strategy for the Primavera Global Business Unit at Oracle. He has more than 29 years of software product strategy, product design, and management, combined with building design and construction industry domain. Prior to his current position, George served as the Senior Director of Product Strategy at Oracle and was responsible for the roadmap, vision, and overall product direction for the Primavera Unifier suite of solutions. George joined the Oracle Primavera Global Business Unit as a result of the acquisition of Skyer Inc. in 2012, where he served as the Vice President of Product Management and Strategy since 2002. During his tenure there, he led and launched the company's next-generation, best-in-class cloud-based products. Prior to joining Skyer, he served as the Vice President of Product Management, Business Development, and Marketing at Reed Construction Data. George obtained his master's degree in architectural engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and his Bachelor of Science degree in architectural engineering. He also completed the Strategic Leadership Program at Harvard Business School. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to George.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Today's webinar, we're going to talk about facilities management and facilities lifecycle management. It's a topic that can be challenging for a lot of companies, especially when they have a large portfolio of assets, buildings, facilities, and how to manage all the challenges that can result as having a large portfolio of properties. Perhaps some of the most common challenges that we see, starting with balancing, financial disciplines, operational excellence, and risk management. How do you actually balance all of these things together? As I said, especially with a large portfolio, how can you make sure that you keep financial discipline on your expenses, your operational expense, as well as your revenues if you're operating facilities where you generate some revenues, whether you are in leasing, retail, or any other vertical. As far as operational excellence, there are a lot of things that take place when managing facilities. Expenses related to maintenance, upgrades, condition assessments, and enhancements in your facilities. And when we talk about risk management, there's a lot of things that get involved into risk management, from safety to compliance to many other things. So one of the main challenges is the balance, how to balance all of these together. And we're going to talk about that as we go through our solutions. Another major challenge that most customers face here and most companies face is the rising costs. Whether it's the rising cost of maintenance, utilities and billings and utilities, or upgrades when you are embarking on a facility upgrade or an enhancement. The cost of all of this is a big challenge. How do you get our arms around all of this? How do you control that cost and make sure that you comply with certain budgets that you have set up year over year for managing these facilities? When we talk about portfolio management in general, there's a challenge when you're dealing with large, facilities with space demands, increasing space demands and availability and capacity. How do you get your arms around that? How do you know where your vacant spaces are? How do you make sure that you're not wasting space? And if you're running out of space to accommodate your new employees or new users, what do you do to expand? That can usually trigger, capital project expansion initiatives. Another part of a product of a portfolio management is how do you deal with your assets and equipment? How do you keep track of them? How do you keep track of warranty information? Are you spending money on things that need to be covered by manufacturers rather than you, spending the money to repair things that are covered under warranty, as an example? And then when we talk about general properties and lease administration, how do you make sure that you are maximizing the occupancy of your space? And how you ensure that, if you're in retail, how do you maximize the occupancy rates for your retail spaces, whether it's a shopping center or a mall or any other type of property? In addition to that, compliance is a big challenge. How do you comply with examples, building codes, property tax? How do you stay on top of that? How do you make sure that you're not missing any payments or environmental regulations? Do you comply with those? These are things that change all the time. How do you keep track of them, especially with that large portfolio of facilities and properties? Could be global, properties that you manage or own or lease all over the world, and each region may have different regulations, different building codes, building requirements, and certainly last but not least is safety measures. How do you comply and make sure that your properties are safe for people who are occupying the buildings and facilities, people who are actually making repairs and working and maintaining your facilities? Major topics, major challenges that a lot of companies face. This is perhaps a summary of, what are some of the main goals, business objectives and requirements, and what are some of the consequential pains if nothing is done to address these things. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. When you look at the goals, most of us have the goal of maximizing our revenue from the portfolios that we own or lease or manage. At the same time, we need to minimize the operating expenses. I'm sure all of you agree with me that that's one of the main goals. In addition, one of the very common goals is how do we improve the customer satisfaction and service levels? As facility managers or corporate real estate managers and executives, these are some of the main goals that we strive for. We want to make sure that we achieve these goals. When we talk about the key business requirements, kind of the next level of detail here is how do I gain visibility across my entire portfolio, the data across all of that, so that I can make effective decisions here that are based on actual real data, real-time data. When you talk about space allocations and space management, do I have real visibility into every space I own or lease or manage across my entire portfolio? They may sound simple challenges, but believe me, a lot of companies are struggling to be able to gain access to this level of information with simple, solutions out there in the market. And, when I talk about this, I talk about it holistically from a life cycle standpoint. I'm not talking about a specific phase in the life cycle. I'm talking from beginning all the way to end, and we're going to get more and more into that as we go through this webinar. And when it comes to maintenance, how fast can I respond to service requests? If it's an emergency service request, something broke, something is a safety hazard, for example, how quickly can I respond to that? So, at the end of the day, if nothing happens, if we don't do anything, a lot of pains can be experienced here, whether it's penalties, whether it's loss of revenue, whether it's missing leasing opportunities or declining customer satisfaction. These are some of the main topics that we believe our solution addresses, and we'll go through the details of how we believe we can solve and address some of these challenges. So I'm pretty sure, a lot of this sounds very, very familiar to many of you. So let's get into it. The term IWMS, which stands for Integrated Workplace Management System, is a term that was coined by, I believe, Gartner called it IWMS, which, in a nutshell, it's another way of looking at a life cycle of facilities. How do you integrate the workplace? They pick the word workplace here, but at the end of the day, it includes all of these 5 main areas. The first one has to do with the general capital project management. How do you build something from beginning, which includes, the planning, the design, the build, the construct, phases of that facility life cycle. Then they talk about the real estate and property portfolio and lease administration, moving on to facilities and space, maintenance, environmental, and facility optimization. This is all great, and we touch on all of that. However, our view is a little bit deeper than that. What we present here is the Oracle Primavera Facility and Asset Lifecycle Management. And the reason why we gave it a different term, excuse me, the reason why we gave it a different name and term here is because we go much deeper. When you look at this diagram, basically it touches every phase of a facility life cycle. You can see the level of depth here as far as the processes involved in every one of these phases, whether it's in the planning phase, the design and estimation and building phase, and then moving on into the operational and maintenance and optimizing that facility. A lot of details, a lot of processes, and we believe our solution addresses all of these processes that are necessary, as a matter of fact, to ensure a smooth operation of a facility from the beginning, the first phase, which is planning typically, all the way until the maintenance and optimization, and the cycle starts all over again. In case you're going to get into renovation, expansion, it starts with planning again, and the cycle keeps going on and on. So let's get into a little bit more of the details here. As we look at the facility life cycle and all these detailed processes, we quickly realize that, one size does not fit all. There's got to be a solution that is adaptable, flexible, configurable, that allows customers to kind of model the solution to their own specific needs. It has best-in-class of the best practices of managing all of these processes, tie them all together on a single platform, however, doesn't take away the flexibility of being able to configure that system to your own specific needs. And that was one of our main objectives here. As an example, if you look at the hierarchy of your portfolio, just think about what you have today. You may be organized by region, by geography, by site, or you may be organized by business units, and then other divisions within each business unit. Whatever your hierarchy or your structure may be, you need a solution that adapts to that structure. Why? Because that's how you manage your facilities. That's how you operate. Well, you don't want a rigid solution that's going to tell you this is how it's going to work, this is the structure, it's country, it's site, it's building, and live with it. We don't do that. We give you that total flexibility to represent your entire real estate portfolio by any type of structure you desire, because that's the way we believe the solution can be most successful. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't some standard pre-configured hierarchy structure objects within the system. There are things from countries to regions to sites to stores if you are in retail, buildings and facilities, lands and lots, empty lots, for example, campuses, etc., etc. It doesn't matter. The point is, all of these common objects are available to you, but with the added benefit and flexibility of being able to modify and manage and capture the data that you care about. So as an example, if this represents one of the buildings that you own or manage or lease, well, I want to capture the data that matters to me, whether it's general information about that building or facility, its location, its address, other things, its area, its square footage, or maybe some other parameters, some other metadata. Maybe you want to capture some high-level financial details about that facility or building, and that's where you want to stop. Maybe you want to capture the color of the building. Any other parameters or data or metadata, its total flexibility is what we offer here. So you can add, modify, and tweak and model the system to your specific needs. And that's only one example. One of the biggest benefits of this hierarchy structure that I'm talking about and the flexibility is it is not a dumb structure. It is an intelligent hierarchy structure. Why do I say that? Well, it's because every level in that hierarchy actually is an environment almost of its own, which means that regardless of which level I'm in that hierarchy, I can roll up data. I can generate dashboards as the one you're looking at here for one building, for one region, for one site, or for the entire portfolio. I have easy access and visibility into that data. As an example, I'm looking at here total leased space versus, usable spaces and availability of space. I can look at, how many square feet I have per building, per facility. I can look at, for example, by department. As long as the data is in the system, generating and capturing all that in dashboards that are interactive and intelligent is priceless, in my opinion. And I believe a lot of you would agree with me that this type of information only makes the process of managing your facilities so much better, so much more efficient, because it's based on intelligent decision making. Again, when we look at the real estate portfolio, the solution allows you to do a lot of other things, comparing sites next to each other, comparing, criteria, which buildings and facilities are leased versus owned. I can track those. I can report on them. Heck, I can even navigate my portfolio with a map because of the built-in GIS mapping and navigation interface that's built into the solution. Just one way to make it easier for all of you to use the system, navigate the system, and access the data. Now, you've seen the diagram before that had all of these processes around the life cycle. Well, these were tons and tons of business processes that are different from one phase to the other. The needs are different. The workflows are different. The kind of data you need to capture are different. Not only that, every company may have a different way of doing things. A work order can be routed very differently from company A to company B. Why? Because that's the way they do business. We can't force you to do it one way or another. Hence, the business process automation and the flexibility that is needed to support that. And that's one of the key elements of our solution is the total flexibility of business process design. Whether it's a simple workflow like this one, where it's a 4-step workflow for a simple work order, for example, or a more sophisticated, more complex one like that. All of the above can be done quite easily with a built-in tool to configure, modify, and change the logic around the business processes. So, you can adapt the business processes to your specific needs rather than the other way around. That's a key element or key objective that we always had in our solution. Now, when we look at the overall life cycle, I talked about the early phase of the planning and the build and design and build. Well, this is what this section is all about. It's the ability to do all the capital planning processes, the design and engineering requirements with the document reviews, the funding processes, the budgeting, the scheduling and resource management, and you can see the list here. All of the above is covered as part of our complete lifecycle management under the project controls side of the solution. So to get into some of the details, for example, on the capital planning side, the solution allows you to do what you would expect from an enterprise level capital planning solution, which is plan, manage budgets, forecasts, spending guidances. And the key thing here is this could be for initiatives or for projects or facilities or maintenance work. It doesn't matter. It's a planning process that you can put in place to budget and set up your yearly budgets and be able to track against those budgets across that entire portfolio to do the year-over-year budgeting and planning processes. It's all real time, and it allows collaboration between those who are doing the planning and those who are actively working on the facilities or within the projects if it is in a project construction type phase. Then, of course, we can't talk about the build, design phase and construct phase without talking about cost controls. So the solution has an extensive tool set and capabilities related to cost management. And cost management includes everything from budgeting to funding to contract management to schedule of values and invoicing processes to change management, cash flow and earned value. And for those of you who are global companies and operate and manage facilities globally, I'm sure multi-currency, multi-language are some of the key things you care about, which are core capabilities within the platform itself. So it applies to everything. In addition, of course, cost control rules. This is where the solution helps you control your spending does not exceed your commitments. Your commitments should not exceed your budgets, etc., etc. All of these rules can be set up with the solution. Then when we get into the typical project management, project delivery phases, this is where schedule management comes in and resource management, and with our deep integration with, of course, with the Primavera P6 solution, which many of you may be using or your contractors are using or your vendors and suppliers. This is about also the common processes that take place on a day-to-day project management, the RFIs, the transmittals, the submittals, the meeting minutes, et cetera, all the common things that you would expect out of a solution to manage the actual projects. Now, I'm talking about project management here, but managing a facility can also trigger small projects. It could be a renovation project, it could be a maintenance project. And the benefit of our solution is it ties it all together. Whether it's a large capital project for new build out, or it could be an expansion, renovation, it doesn't quite matter. It's still a project in this sense. Now, when we start talking about the operational phase now in maintenance, now that the facilities are constructed or renovated or built, we have assets that we're dealing with. The asset could be the entire facility or building. The asset can also be the equipment installed within the building. It could be movable assets, could be fixed assets. What am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about things like chillers, air handling units, boilers, heck, even the thermostat in your room. It can be considered a piece of equipment that needs to be maintained and tracked. Well, perhaps one of the challenges that many companies face today is the ability to keep track of all of these assets and equipment, especially in a large portfolio of properties. Are you aware of all your warranty information? When does the warranty expire? Am I spending money on things that I should not be spending money on because it's covered under warranty? Am I doing regular asset inspection and facility inspection on these things to assess the condition of them? Am I capturing the deferred maintenance costs so I can budget for it next year or the year after? Can I get real-time total cost of ownership of each asset, equipment, or the entire building or facility? These are some of the areas that our solution does address and address quite well. So here are some examples of the asset management and equipment management. And let me clarify one thing. When we talk about asset management here, we're not talking about an enterprise asset management system. We're talking about asset management in the context of your buildings and facilities. So your building can be an asset, your equipment, as I said earlier, and systems installed within the building are assets. That's the concept of asset management we're talking about here. And as you can see on down some of these screenshots from our solution, I can track and capture any type of data. Where is the equipment installed? What model number it is? What type? What's the manufacturer? What's the serial number? What's the cost of repairs performed so far? What is the warranty information? When did it start? When did it finish? Maybe capture some screenshots of images of that piece of equipment so that I'm familiar with it. You can get an idea here about what I'm talking about. Having all that information, multiply that by thousands and thousands of assets installed in your buildings starts to make a lot of sense now, because it makes it easier, obviously. Now, having the assets means we need to inspect these assets. We need to assess their condition. Many companies, especially in the healthcare industry and universities and many other verticals, they do these regular inspections, facility condition inspections. Well, the solution provides you with this inspection process that you do every month, every 6 months, every year. It's really your call how often you perform those. But the more important thing is the solution provides you the tools to be able to do the facility condition inspection, capture the deficiencies, replacement costs, current and future deferred maintenance needs, and it's all organized in the Uniformat 2 code structure, which most owners and companies actually manage at that level when it comes to building systems. And the whole idea behind that is to develop what we call the Facility Condition Index, the FCI index. Most companies manage that way so that they assess exactly the condition of their facilities, and based on the FCI index, they can make some intelligent decisions. Should I replace? Should I keep maintaining? That's one of the key decisions that many facility managers and corporate real estate managers need to make on a regular basis. When it comes to maintenance management, our solution is very extensive, especially here when we talk about preventive maintenance. So preventive or corrective maintenance, to be specific. So the solution touches corrective and reactive work orders and maintenance, the preventive work orders, which can be generated automatically, and we'll talk about the details in a second. We honor things like the seasonal maintenance and exceptions. You know, there are certain things, certain recurring type of maintenance that we all do, but you know, we don't do it year round. Sometimes we need to stop those work orders during maybe summer seasons or during winter seasons, whatever it may be, or during certain days of the week even, and the system does support all of the above. And certainly when we talk about work orders, it means that we need to support the in-the-field work order mobile response and updates, which means technicians can receive the work orders while they are out there in the field on their mobile devices, do the work, update the work orders, submit the updates, and complete the work, and then move on to the next job. That's part of what we're talking about. And on maintenance management, preventive here, to be specific, these are some of the most common things that I'm sure are very familiar to you. You know, you need a system that supports time-based frequency. You need a system that supports fixed and float schedules, meter-based frequencies, gauge and continuous meters. I'm not going to read the whole list, but you get the idea. These are very common must-have capabilities within any maintenance management solution, and that's exactly what we have in the Oracle Primavera facility and asset lifecycle management, specifically under the maintenance management area. Of course, the objective here is to be able to respond quickly to these work orders, to be able to keep your facilities running smoothly, no breakdowns as much as possible, and to be able to keep track of, you know, the tasks, the labor, the material, and be able to capture all of that to reach actually the point of total cost of ownership of these assets and equipment. Some examples of what these work orders may look like. Again, it also captures the data about the piece of equipment or the asset we're trying to maintain. But more importantly, if you look here on the tabs, it captures all the tasks that need to be performed when the technician receives that work order. What are the required labor, estimated labor hours, and the actuals when the technician performs the work, the material, as well as meter readings. I might as well. If I'm on site and I have a piece of equipment or an asset that has meters that I need to capture the meter readings, I do that also while I'm on site. Why? Because it may actually end up triggering the next work order if it reaches the threshold that you've set up in your configuration of the solution. And we can't talk about maintenance management without talking about material. You know, when folks go out there and maintain their facilities and assets and equipment, they need material. So what we have in our solution as well is a solution to capture and keep track of all these spare parts, you can call them. You know, the belts, the filters, the light bulbs, the transformers, the things that on a regular basis need to be used to maintain and perform the type of work they do on an ongoing basis. Hence, the introduction of our material management solution, which covers things like the SKU management, so you can keep track of the library of all of the types of material with the manufacturer name, the SKU number, the average unit price of that, maybe even the vendors and suppliers who sells those by region, and in addition to that, of course, an inventory management to keep track of that. Now, don't get confused. This is not an enterprise inventory management system with, you know, all the FIFO and LIFO type processes. No, we're talking about maintenance management. We're talking about material management for materials primarily used to perform these type of maintenance management. Now, it can also be integrated with your ERP systems. So in case you're managing these type of material, even for maintenance management on your ERP system, that's perfectly fine, and Unifier can integrate with that ERP system to keep accurate count of these materials in case you manage it somewhere else. However, the solution has a built-in inventory management, ordering processes, delivery processes, and receipt processes, and you keep track of the cost. Inventory adjustments could be manual adjustments as well, and then we use a simple average unit costing. So when work is performed, I can estimate or calculate what is the cost of material. Labor follows the same logic as well. You can see in this simple screenshot example how the material management from the inventory management standpoint looked like. It can be grouped by type of material or part. It could be anything. It's fully configurable. Again, everything you see here is configurable. Each part can have records to represent what that part is, the image of it, the manufacturer, which warehouse it's in, even which bin it's sitting in if you manage at that level from a warehouse standpoint. And of course, the quantity on hand, the initial quantity, any adjustments, and any issued amounts or quantities that the technicians have used while performing their work. And like many other things within our solution, the parts management or inventory management has a worksheet that rolls up all of these parts by manufacturer, by code, by model number, and gives you a complete overview of exactly what's the status, what's the, the count of what I have in my warehouse. This could be by warehouse or it could be across multiple warehouses as well. And you can see in the columns here where I have the quantity on hand, the initial quantity, the issued quantity as a result of work orders, and the work orders consume parts, of course, and material. Well, again, this worksheet that you see on the screen is configurable. It's almost like an intelligent spreadsheet that gets updated dynamically as a result of the processes that take place. Moving on to the overall facility and real estate cost management. We can't manage facilities without considering cost. And the term cost here may sound like it's an expense. Well, it's actually both. In this case, when I manage facilities and I budget for my facilities, it's actually both revenue and expense accounts. So the system supports a very flexible account cost code structure that you can define, whether you want to follow your GL codes, GL account codes, or you have a separate structure. Quite honestly, the system does not force you to do it one way or another, because that's a very common point of integration with ERP systems again. So it's up to you to set this up to the best code structure that fits your needs. It allows you to do your common, typical things you would expect: yearly budgets, adjustments, even budget transfers between one account code to another, set up master service agreements, do all of your commitments, purchase orders for service, material, or both, the commitment changes, meaning change orders or PO changes, and of course, on the spending side, it's the entire invoicing process that can also take place on the system. So once a work order, as an example, once a work order is complete, now if it's billable, if it's marked as a billable work, now an invoice can be automatically generated, routed for review and approval, and then it can integrate, if needed, with an ERP system to actually go out and physically make the payment, come back to you, to the system, and update that and notify everybody about the event. Moving on to the space management. Of course, having a large portfolio of properties and facilities means that we need to deal with space. How can we optimize space? How can we best use every space we have? How can we have and gain visibility into the spaces? And how can we assign space to employees and departments, as an example? All of the above is part of the solution. Now, it comes with a predefined set of configurable space classifications, common space, usable space, major vertical penetrations, storage, et cetera, all the things you need to do the BOMA calculations, for example, for net leasable space. And you can do the processes for assigning space to employees and do space requests. So if a new hire is joining the company, they can submit what we call a space request. It gets reviewed, and then check availability of space, which building, which city, which region, find the right space, assign the space to the employee. Just an example. And, change is inevitable. So there will always be a MAC process, a move, add, change process. That's also part of the solution. I need to move people around. I need to move departments around. I need to move one piece of equipment from one location to another if it's a movable asset, as an example. And we do have an integration with AutoCAD, a simple integration with, graphical CAD system, so that some of the space planning and design can be done on the graphical side before bringing it into Unifier to really automatically generate the space records and the building floors and the levels dynamically, and it can synchronize that back with the CAD system. And as you would expect from space management, stacking plans for vacancies, occupancy, or by department, or any other criteria can easily be done as part of the solution, including, by the way, room reservation process, which, you know, many companies don't have an internal process to manage and reserve rooms and spaces. The solution also has that capability. Just some examples of what the space management capabilities and interface looks like. We're looking at a floor plan here and all the spaces within that floor plan, and then, you know, an actual space record of a usable space happens to be a conference room. All the metadata here is configurable. You can even mark that space whether it can be reservable or not to support the room reservation I talked about. And areas are calculated dynamically based on the CAD drawings that were brought into the system, and many other things are done through that space management capability. Talking about stacking plans, this is an example of what a vacancy stacking plan looks like, and you can see it floor by floor for all 6 floors of this building. And then here we're looking at it from a different aspect. This is actually stacking plan based on usable space by type of space. And there are tooltips. If I highlight one of these areas, it will give me the name of the department that's occupying that space, so I can get a sense of how many square feet are being used. Likewise, as I said at the very beginning, given that the data is in the system, it means I can easily generate these type of very intuitive, drillable, interactive dashboards. In this example, we're looking at a summary of occupied versus vacant in this particular University Avenue building. We're looking on the right-hand side as which departments or cost centers are being charged for these spaces based on their allocations. I can do trends. I can do vacancy trends to see whether my vacancy spaces are going up or going down. Think about strategic decision-making here. When I've got this at a building level, it's great. But think about it at a corporate real estate portfolio level now to be able to see your vacancy trends as an example. Huge benefits, of course, gaining access to this type of information across your portfolio. And when we talk about real estate lease administration, again, most of you who are involved in lease administration, whether you are the tenant or you are the landlord, we support both of them. The system supports both of them, starting with a lease request process, possibly tenant leases, landlord leases, subleases, and of course, everything else that come around with that, along with that, lease modifications. And more importantly, the system has the ability to auto-generate and create and route the lease payment requests. So if you are the landlord, the system will automatically, based on a schedule that you set up, will generate the lease payment, send it out to your tenants automatically, and request payment. If you are the tenant, it will generate the payment request that goes into your accounts payable so that you don't miss a payment, a lease payment. And when I talk about lease payments, it is not just for the rent, obviously. It could be for CAM, it could be for lease, actual lease payment, it could be for insurance, it could be for property tax, whatever it may be. All these types and classifications of payments are supported as well. And, you know, one of the things about lease management is if I lease and manage a large portfolio, I will have some challenge keeping track of my critical dates. When does the lease expire? Did I miss the date to renew my lease and get a better deal? Can I exercise my options? How many options? How long is each option? Things related to lease management are very, very common. Well, the system tracks that for you and automatically generates the alerts and actions and even assign them and assign tasks to individuals to take care of that. A screenshot example of a lease record. Again, the data is configurable, but this is just an example of what you can capture on a lease record, from the landlord information to the general lease, some of the key terms, the area that we're leasing or the space, are there any security deposit requirements, how much are they? You can see a lot of data can be captured here as far as the lease information. And more importantly, of course, is looking down at the tabs down below here where you set up all your lease terms, the key dates that I was talking about that the system will keep track of for you, the lease options, all the contact information, any clauses and provisions, any notes you want to take, and guess what? Also, all the lease payments that you've made up to date, up to the minute, can be rolled up and exposed on this last tab of payments. So I can open a lease record and find out exactly every single payment I've done to date, accurately rolled up here, so I can capture the exact total lease payments I've done to date. Just like everything else in the system, I can generate these dashboards at a building level, facility level, regional level, campus level, or for the entire portfolio. I can look at here in this example, I'm looking at leased areas by building. So now I'm looking at it for my entire real estate portfolio as I'm pointing out with my mouse here. And you can see by building, 1 Park Avenue, 14th Wall Street, et cetera, and you can see quickly which buildings have the largest dollar amount or percent-wise of my lease payments as an example. And certainly I can do a lot more. Here is the rent per square foot, and I can see which areas, which buildings, which regions are costing me more than others. Trends are very important for us and for you. So this is an example of how I can now, based on the data I have, I can actually start looking at the lease payment trends. Are my lease payments going up or going down? As a corporate real estate executive, I would really care about this dashboard because I want to see which regions maybe have a trend of lease payments that keeps going up and which ones are going down. Maybe I need to relocate to another location to cut cost. Decision-making, strategic decision-making support. And you can't talk about real estate portfolio management without talking about transaction management. What is transaction management? It's the common processes related to property acquisitions, dispositions, where we provide the processes necessary to capture the needs and criteria. You can compare, properties. You can capture the data for all the prospective properties that you're interested in moving into or leasing or acquiring maybe, and you can compare them. We help you initiate and capture and put together the letters of intent as an example. And as a result of that, the system will automatically either generate a property object for you, the building. In other words, if you end up closing the deal, it will generate the building object that you've seen some examples of here and puts it in the right place in the hierarchy based on either the region, site, city, or whatever the criteria may be. But in many cases, this property acquisition may end up being something totally different. May end up being, after you do the analysis, that, it might be better for us to actually construct that building rather than go and acquire one or lease one. And that's where a project initiation, now we're talking about capital projects, can be initiated within the system, and that's that entire project management phase that I talked about earlier for capital planning and construction management. One other very important area that I'm not going to say I was surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of you would have that same challenge, which is, am I keeping track of all my portfolio data? Parcels, deeds, titles, insurance records, insurance payments, easements, property tax, permits, etc., etc. It may sound very simple to many of you, okay? And I'm sure you have them on paper records or on spreadsheets or scanned PDF documents. That's great. However, think about having it in an intelligent database, in an intelligent system where I can actually quickly report on them, search for these records, find the deeds, find examples, look at the drawings of my actual parcel and see it visually here and be able to capture all that type of information because it's intelligent data captured within the system, not only for a single building or parcel, but it's across the entire portfolio. This is where it makes sense when you have a large portfolio. I keep repeating the word large portfolio because that's when the size of data becomes a challenge to manage, okay? Moving on to the last segment here, which is really all about energy and utilities and consumption. Well, what we do here is we help you manage your utilities and energy management. What we do is we provide you with a predefined processes to capture the utility consumption data. whether it's gas meters, water meters, electric meters, or any other that you can design yourself, by the way. But, standard processes are provided to capture that data. Now, where's the data coming from? That's a very good question. Well, multiple ways. Now, with the involvement of digital meters, a lot of utility companies now can provide that data digitally. Okay, so very common ways of doing that, and some folks do it already in Europe, where it's an integration point with the utility meters. So that feeds a database that integrates with the system and will capture, even on an hourly basis, if need be, the consumption of, say, your electricity. And the fact that you have all of this data now in the system per building, you can roll it up for each city, for each region, for each site, and across the entire portfolio. Why is it important? It is because if I have the data and I can run reports and show it on dashboards, I can immediately identify which buildings are consuming the most energy, which buildings are consuming the most water. Can I do something to improve that? Can I save energy? Can I save cost, more importantly? Because if I identify, between my 20 buildings in the Northeast, 2 of them have 60% more energy consumption than others, something must be wrong. And that may trigger a sustainability or an energy conservation renovation project. Maybe I need to replace the light bulbs. Maybe I need to increase the insulation in my roofs, etc., etc. So this is where the benefit of having the data actually becomes so useful to you to make some executive decisions as to how you manage your facilities. And perhaps the last item here is the, more on the sustainability side, where, predefined processes are going to be available for you to capture things just like on the utility side. This is a little bit more analysis here for capturing things like the carbon footprint, waste generation, recycling. How much paper am I recycling? How much glass or copper or whatever it may be. Why? Because at the end of the day, we provide with that framework for capturing and benchmarking this sustainability type data, as you can see on the screenshot here. And at the end of the day, think about it as a support mechanism for LEED certification. It's a support mechanism to be able to do data analysis and to find out whether I can qualify for LEED Silver, Gold, or whatever that certification may be. So it's really, again, capturing the data to make it easier for you to make these decisions and to be able to report back to the authorities, if need be, to get that certification type that you probably have been trying to get for a while. And I think with that, just to sum it all up, these are high-level now benefits, if you would, for our Oracle Primavera FALM solution. I touched here on some of the key business requirements and needs, the visibility across the entire portfolio to help you make effective decision making, the ability to have that transparency and visibility into the space allocations so I can maximize occupancy, for example. How can I track all life cycle costs from beginning all the way to the end? How can I respond faster to service requests and maintenance, and many, many other things that I talked about. And then the benefits from what we believe the solution can provide you, whether it's minimizing the downtime and cost, faster response to the issues that may arise for maintenance and repairs and breakdowns, better utilization of your spaces, and better visibility across your entire portfolio. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to Anne, and I hope this kind of touched on some of the key areas that you feel are needed, and you experience some of these challenges. So back to you, Anne.
Thank you, George. Thank you. And thanks for providing all of that great information on facility and asset lifecycle management. And I'd also like to thank Oracle for sponsoring the presentation. Our attendees, please submit any additional questions at this point for George, and he will be answering them via email. Finally, a recording of this webinar will be available at facilityexecutive.com as well as on Oracle's website. Thank you again for joining us today,